Lando Norris triumphs at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix as McLaren win the Constructors Championship for the first time since 1998. This is Shifting Happens. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Shifting Happens. My name is Baxty B, and please do excuse I'm still fighting off the remnants of a cold that I've had since last week, but I will be okay. I call that the end of season fatigue. Came a little bit early. But joining me on this week's episode, we have got Shez, we have got AJ, and we have got Rory. And working diligently, as always, behind the scenes, we've got our brilliant producer, Fly. Let's talk about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, shall we, chaps? Lando Norris taking a dominant victory for McLaren. As you can see, we've got the papaya in celebration of that. But not only that, McLaren are the Constructors Champions for the first time since 1998. Richly deserved championship. Shez, what was your takeaway from the race, and how good have McLaren been in 2024?
I think I've been fairly critical. First of all, I have to give a shout out to our resident Ferrari fan AJ, who is in black in mourning, as you can all see. It's been a tough season for AJ. He now can't show his face. I'm sorry for you, man.
It's sad times.
It's sad times. Not if you're from Woking though. And I have to say, I'm here for it, man. I've had a lot of criticism for McLaren this season. I think operationally they've had a few blunders, but actually, to be fair, they've progressed over the course of the season. Their lead drivers seem to have got over his first lap issues, and technically, which I think is the most important thing that a team can bring. They've really been the best, and the 26 years for me is poignant. I'm a kid of the 90s, and for me, watching Ferrari and McLaren go at it, hammer and tongs, 98, 99, even 2007, 2008. That for me is quintessential Formula One, and to see that again in a new era. I feel like a kid again. It's brilliant.
Yeah, no, Shez. I mean, it has been very old school seeing Ferrari and McLaren duke it out for a World Constructors Championship, isn't it? It's been good fun.
So much fun.
Though on this rare occasion, McLaren getting the result over Ferrari, if you think of the late 90s, early 2000s. AJ, I am going to have to come to you. You are the Ferrari fan here. Look, to be honest with you, your boys threw everything at them. Charles had a drive for the ages, and Carlos benefited from Max Verstappen deciding to just vibe his way through that last race. What's your thoughts on McLaren? And then, obviously, give us a quick word on Ferrari as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, very similar to what you and Shez were saying. This is F1 heritage at its best. Ferrari and McLaren going head to head. It is what it's supposed to be. Traditionally, one of the biggest rivals in the sport. It's great to see that rivalry come back, but it's not one of those hostile rivalries from what we've seen this season. It is a very sort of sportsman-like between both garages. And that's good to see. It's great to see. All deservingly so. They definitely deserve the championship. Uh, there were many times where I've also been very critical of them. I do think that they still have some things to work on, at least on their pit wall when it comes to managing strategies and calls and so on and so forth. Because at some points this season, it was equal to Ferrari of the last decade with some calls. But at the end of the day, well deserved. It's nice to see a team end their drought. Two good drivers on board. Lando breaking his curse, finishing the season strong. It's hopefully this carries on and he can translate this into the start of next season. But on Ferrari's end of things, as painful as it is to, lose the constructors and for Charles to finish third in the Drivers' Championship short of Lando, I still think this was a brilliant season for the Maranello based team. Like, it has been unexpected. They fought all the way till the last race of the season. I honestly couldn't complain. As painful as it is, I cannot complain for us having the season that we've had. I think it was a good way to send Carlos off and an absolutely brilliant race for Charles. Both of them did really, really well. Yeah, it's good race, good season. No complaints.
Yeah, cheers, AJ. We'll go a bit more in depth into Ferrari shortly. But Rory, a word on Lando Norris. That was, given the pressure he was under after Oscar Piastri being taken out in turn one, that was a sublime drive under that pressure, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was pressure involved. I do think Lando benefited from the main title fight being off of Max as well. That he could that wasn't something he could bother focus on. He knew he had the constructors fight, and there was points that race where I thought McLaren were going to make a stupid decision, bring Lando in for a second stop, and that a second we know in F1 pit stops that usually McLaren are under game, but McLaren could easily fudge the pit stop and let the Ferraris take advantage. But no, I think McLaren, I have my fair criticisms of McLaren. It looked like my representation of McLaren up to Abu Dhabi of securing this constructors fight was basically a sprinter in a hurdles race, going over the hurdles and keeps hitting the hurdles, and then everyone else just falls over and he just jumps over the line. But no, I think they deserve it, and it's great for for McLaren to actually kind of get like that mental barrier of not winning a constructors for like 20 years. I know it was in 2008 they could have won the constructors, but we kind of had that got wiped. But no, but I think overall I think Andrea Stella has done an amazing job in that team. I think like Alonso said before the race that he went up to Andrea, and Andrea Stella was Alonso's race engineer Ferrari, and he said to Stella that I hope you after this race in the night in Abu Dhabi you can actually have joy and happiness, and this is what actually happened after the losses in of 2012 and 2010. But no, I think Zach Brown is faced with that McLaren team, but Andrea Stella has been working diligently behind the scenes, and he's actually but I think as well it shows that McLaren is it's the first time in the hybrid era that a customer has won a title, like a title. I know Red Bull there was under the Renault and Red Bull days, it was more of a works team, kind of customer team. But this McLaren showed that you can win it with if you have everything aligned, you can win the constructors as a customer team, and that's all.
Do you not think that's quite ironic, Rory? That it's McLaren that have won a constructors championship with a customer car, given that the reason that they were in a mess that Zach Brown found them in the first place was because Ron Dennis was insistent on having a Honda engine, saying that you can't win a championship without a works engine deal.
He's eating the biggest slice of humble pie, isn't he? Like,
but I think, but Rory, just to pick up on your point about Zach Brown being the face of this, but Andrea Stella being the one that needs to get all the credit. I would flip that on its head and say that actually this is arguably the third age of McLaren, right? In that you had the original Bruce McLaren, Teddy Mayer era, and then the Ron Dennis, House of Dennis era, and now since 2016, this is definitely the house that Zach built, isn't it? Yes, Andrea Stella is the guy that's the face of the team right now in terms of like he's the team principal, but we have to give Zach credit.
Zach he does credit as well, but it's
Rory. I think massive credit though in that he was the one that was the person that ditched the Honda engines and got Renault in, so that we finally realized that it wasn't the Honda engine on its own that was holding them back, and somehow McLaren had the greatest chassis that had ever been created. And then, when he realized that he made good hires. Andreas Seidel was a good hire. James Key was a okay hire, but he was able to follow results when things didn't work out. He was brave enough to make changes. He was smart enough to promote from within and see what talent there was at McLaren. That's what brought Andrea Stella in, and he was able to bolster that, give Andrea Stella the license to be able to make the hires in the technical department that needed to be made. That's why they've got Peter Prodromou still. Well, he's long standing, isn't he, in the aero department? What's the guy from Red? Yeah,
Rob Marshall.
Yeah. Those are key hires that have made McLaren the force that they are right now from a technical point of view. I don't think that can be ignored or even sidelined.
Yeah, I understand that point, and I think my point is really that Zach deserves credit. He like you said, he built the foundations of this third era of McLaren, but Stella, it was like representation. Zach was on the podium; he deserves to be on the podium, but I felt like that could be a moment for Stella as well, because the relationship with Zach and Stella is that Stella will do everything behind the scenes. In a sense, he doesn't like being on camera. He likes to focus on the team culture and so forth, and Zach will give him what he wants. And I think Stella deserves plaudits as well. I think I'll take what I said back and say that I think they deserve both huge credit in this third age of McLaren.
I do think that, sorry, Bass, I promise this will be the last point on this one, but I do think it's interesting that this era of McLaren sort of, I think, showcases how Formula One has changed inherently. Like in that era of Ron Dennis and McLaren, Ron was not just the team owner, he was the team principal. They were one combined unit. He made all the calls. So he was doing all the sponsorship deals, all the commercial stuff, as well as making the big driver and technical decisions. He was the one that got Adrian Newey in the door. Okay, Martin Whitmarsh by the end of it was doing some of the day-to-day stuff, but it was always Ron front and center. Whereas this, I think Formula One in itself has changed, right? Now, even at Ferrari, well, actually, Ferrari is slightly different in that they've McLaren have sort of adopted a Ferrari sort of model now, haven't they? Because in the day it was Luca de Montezemolo with Jean Todt as the team principal, and now they've gone to McLaren have kind of gone to that model as well, and that seems to suggest that's the model to go for in modern Formula One. Anyway,
it's always the Ferrari model.
Yeah, I mean, I think both Zach and Stella deserve a lot of credit, don't they? I mean, I always say about Stella that he's the best thing that Fernando Alonso ever did for McLaren, because he brought him over with him in 2015, and look what he's done now. So, yeah, absolutely. I see that Fly has popped in. Is there anything you want to say on McLaren, my friend?
Yeah, no, I think, listen, all credit to the Papayas, but I think this clearly also shows the missed opportunity that Ferrari had and the total abomination that was Red Bull with Sergio Perez. I think the first couple of races, if I'm not mistaken, they were up, not by a significant margin, but you didn't, there's no way you would have expect Sergio to have that type of downfall. But then you look at last year after Miami and Monaco, and then you can probably say the same thing. Well, that's when the trend started to go lower for them. But I think, if you look back as a Ferrari fan, and AJ, I'm sorry that you're here. Yes, you are the leader, I believe, with 16 Constructor Championships. And to think that McLaren just got their fourth, right, with their history, that's kind of hard to believe.
The ninth.
Right? Or no? Okay, so then I guess I read that wrong. somewhere in there. But like still, like it just, to me, it kind of says the missed opportunities that Ferrari had and how bad Sergio Perez was, because Max was still able to get that car at least if not on pole, at least top 5, right? So that's the way that I see it.
Okay, so if I can, Baxty, just slightly contrarian view on that front. With regards to anything, I think it was really McLaren's constructors to lose. Because if we're looking at the trend of 2023, towards the tail end of 2023, it started becoming very evident that the McLarens were going to be the second best car on the grid in terms of how they were developing the car throughout the year. From where they started and where they ended, they had significantly improved their car, and if they had continued that trajectory to this year, which they have, they were by far and out for a majority of the season the best car on track, barring the early Red Bull dominance. Barring the early Red Bull dominance, the McLarens had the car to beat. They were the car to beat, and all credit where credit is due. They deserve a lot of credit for the work that's been done into the car the last 2 years, and rightly so. Rightly so. Zach Brown and Stella deserve huge plaudits for where they've gotten. But considering that Ferrari weren't even expected to be competing at where Red Bull and McLaren were, at the end of the day, I think McLaren kind of lost it a little bit to allow Ferrari to come that close. Because, in my opinion, if I looked at it, no matter how good some of the drives were by Charles and Carlos this season, if McLaren hadn't fumbled certain things, this would have been by far and out. They would have wrapped this up last race, not even this race. And I can say the same thing. There were 2 races where Ferrari fumbled points. One being Baku as well. But yeah, I just think this was McLaren's to lose, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that, I think, because, I mean, look, Red Bull was still very, very quick, but they lost it because of Checo, and we'll get to him shortly. But yeah, I think Ferrari had that dip sort of around Canada time where they had an upgrade that didn't quite work properly, and it took them about 6 races to really get that sorted. And that's really where they lost the Constructors Championship. I think if they'd had a slightly smoother run with the driver pairing that they've got, I think they probably would have ended up winning the Constructors. But yeah, I think just a last word on McLaren. I think if you think where they were in 2017, they finished 9th in the Constructors Championship out of 10. And in 7 years, they've turned that ship around through great hires, through really canny decisions on drivers. Zach seemed to know exactly what to do with drivers when the opportunity came. Like Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris in 2019, I feel was like a real turning point for them. And then, Carlos left in 2020 at the end of 2020. That was his choice. Daniel Ricciardo was a good pickup at the time on paper, and given the results he'd had in 2020, we all thought he was going to go and do really well. Obviously, that then went to crap after that. But then going and getting Oscar Piastri and having that contract war with Alpine was actually really important for the team to be able to get him in, and I think it's really strengthened them going forward. And then hiring Andrea Stella as well, well, not hiring him, but sort of promoting from within and giving him the team principal position has been fantastic. Now, you'll see on screen we've got the super times. Shez, I know this is your thing, so I'll let you talk us through the through the data.
Lol, I do love a super time. If you don't know what a super time is, it's basically just a way of working out what is the fastest car per weekend, regardless of track length. You don't necessarily need to know how to work it out, but this will tell you what the fastest car was at each track per round this season. It's a bit difficult to see, but you can see sort of the first 7 races to Imola. it's all just Red Bull. That's the lead that they managed to build up. That's how Max was able to get that buffer in the championship. And the problem that happened for everybody else after that, and this is what I think anyway, was that once Red Bull stopped winning, everybody else took turns. So that, I think, is what saved Max in terms of the championship battle. There was never one consistent challenger across the entirety of the rest of the season. And he was still picking up races where he was the fastest. This is actually only up until Brazil, but he was always kind of there or thereabouts, whereas everybody else was really up and down. And for me, that was why Max did as well as he did. But I think this, as AJ and Baxley have said, shows really clearly why Ferrari didn't win the championship, because the constructors anyway, because that dip between Canada and the Netherlands, like they were nowhere. They were clearly trying to work out what the heck was going on with their upgrade. They were getting massive bouncing. They'd fallen in, I think, into the problem that other teams had got into, that their data on the sim and the wind tunnel was telling them, if you do this, you'll get massive downforce. They did it, and they just got bouncing, and there was a clear balance to be had between maximum downforce and maximum mechanical efficiency. And that's what McLaren managed to do. That's why they were, on average, the quickest car across the final part of the season. That, for me, AJ, is what lost Ferrari the championship. It's not a missed opportunity necessarily. They went down a rabbit hole that I think every team in the ground effect era has gone down.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree with that. I think the way you described it was pretty spot on. That's definitely the biggest part where they lost out.
And there's a point as well that with McLaren could, if McLaren had brought, it's all hypothetical, if McLaren had brought that Miami upgrade at the start of the year, we could have had a total different story. And I think that's what McLaren needs to improve going into next season. They're kind of they were in that kind of Red Bull phase of let's develop late into the season, except for McLaren. They only brought one major upgrade package and minor ones along the way. But still, if McLaren can get their development out the door, say, let's look at this season, and they had that development, this is all hypothetical, like I said, this championship could have been wrapped up. Max maybe wouldn't have had that buffer as he had if he had at the start of the season, because once we saw that McLaren start to have pace to win a race or consistently, Lando could have been that thorn in Max's side. But I do think it's all hypothetical, but I think but also I think with the Ferrari thing as well, going into that dip, I do think you can kind of see a positive out of it, that it's not like Ferrari yesteryears that they're still scrambling going into the winter or for half the season about their upgrades not working. It took them 6 races and they got on track. So that gives confidence to that aero team at Maranello, that we found out what was wrong and we got on track. Yes, it may have cost us constructors, but it shows that we were able to overcome that that patch of we're getting bouncing, or it's the upgrades are not working. So it's not taking us most of the season up to the last 5 races to realize what's happened.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think another thing that we need to praise from McLaren for is every single upgrade that they put on the car worked and gave them performance. Ferrari obviously put an upgrade on the car that didn't work. Mercedes are still trying to work out what the hell happened in Spa. Apart from the Vegas weekend where everything just miraculously worked. And Red Bull as well had some updates that just didn't really work out for them. And I know Max, even though he won a championship in the RB20, said he's kind of happy to stick that one in the factory and not drive it again. So if McLaren can kind of keep that momentum going forward, I mean, they already are the favourites for next year, but I think they could be quite difficult to beat, I think. Certainly in the constructors, the drivers less so, but certainly in the constructors, they will be quite difficult to beat. But then Ferrari have got a bit of a trump card coming their way. We'll talk about him in a minute. Let's talk about Ferrari. Let's talk about their race. I thought Sainz and Leclerc did an outstanding job. Sainz definitely benefited from the chaos and carnage in front of him caused by Max Verstappen. But he threw everything at it. He tried his best, but just did not have the pace to keep with Lando. That McLaren was just too quick. Charles Leclerc, on the other hand, produced an absolute masterclass. I mean, it was incredible what he was able to do. He had the perfect start. I've not seen a start that good since Kimi Räikkönen in Portimao 2020, when you just look at the screens and go, how are you there? How did you get from there to there? Just picked his way through the chaos beautifully, particularly the Bottas-Perez incident. I think that's where he really benefited from sort of just finding the karting line and going round the outside. But they threw everything at it. They were desperate to win the Constructors. It didn't quite work out for them, but I thought great way to end the season for Ferrari. And Rory, your take on the Charles Leclerc drive?
Yeah, it didn't help that his energy store decided not to work, which is typical Ferrari. When you need it at its most present time, it fails. But no, that the race team didn't do that this time. It was more that the reliability kind of let them down. But still, I think the McLarens just had the pace all weekend on the race pace and qualifying. Yes, Ferraris always have that edge in qualifying in the sense that they're always close in a one lap, but once they do struggle with their tires or their pace in general. But no, I think Ferrari can be happy. I think. Yes, they'll be disappointed that they didn't get that constructors title. It's always Ferrari's year next year, but no. I do think with Fred Vasseur going into this season, his second full season as a team principal, I think he can be very happy being only about less than 16 points behind McLaren, and you've got multiple wins, multiple podiums. You're competitive for most of the season until that patch. But yeah, I think they should be happy going into the winter season, into the off season, and getting ready for next year. Hopefully, they can have a car that's. We don't know what they're going to do. It's probably going to be an evolution of this car, and just hope that they can continue this form into next year. But yeah, I think Vasseur should be happy with his team. Yes, he has a new driver coming in, which we'll talk about later. But I think Ferrari overall can be happy with the season. It's a much improved season. Yes, they had their moments strategy-wise. Reliability is always going to be a problem until 26, until they can. It's all new layouts. The engine freeze is gone, so I think Ferrari should just be happy with the season. Yes, they missed out, but it's a big improvement on previous years.
Shez, is the moniker the modern day Jean Alesi dead?
Good Lord, when was it ever alive?
In our world.
Honestly,
shout out to Cam, by the way. That's not a shot at Cam. I love him dearly. I just needed to get that question out there.
Yeah, I mean, me too. But I have to say, it doesn't help when every now and again Charles does something silly on track, and they quickly pan to Jean Alesi in the paddock. I don't really, literally, they must be listening to Cameron. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that was ever really a moniker that fit. If you actually looked at what Charles does in the car, it's not really a thing. But I think for me, Charles has been, next to Max, probably the most consistent driver on the grid this year. So he hasn't always had the car to do it, but whatever he's had in general, he's maximized it. But again, there was still a slight sense in Charles that when the car really dips, he really dips with it much more than Sainz does. I've talked about this in our channel as well, but I think there's a difference between a raise the floor driver and a raise the ceiling kind of driver. So Sainz is a classic raise the floor driver. Whatever is thrown at him, there will be a baseline level of performance that is decent. He'll get a good result out of that car. Whereas Charles, I wouldn't say he's, as Cameron often puts it, a fair weather driver. I don't think that's how I would class it. I think you can get more out of a really good package than someone like Sainz can. But that package needs to be there. But that's also in his hands. And this season for me showed a little bit more him, as he said, trying not to be nice and trying to direct Ferrari, given that he is the incumbent and will be next season as well, directing development and performance towards what he likes. And Carlos just had to make do with that. He coped with it really well. But I think if you were going to put your money on one of those two drivers getting you a decent, a better qualifying and race result, in general, you put that on Charles, and he's kind of repaid that expectation this season, I think.
Yeah, I mean, AJ, it was a great result for both drivers, and obviously the perfect send off for Carlos, wasn't it? I mean, I know you are very much the Leclerc guy out of the two, and but your thoughts on their race yesterday, and what this might mean for next year.
Yeah, no, I think it was a brilliant race. I think both of them have done really well. And for obviously everyone knows I'm more of a Leclerc guy, but that's not to slate Carlos as a driver. He is a good driver. And he has had a pretty good time at Ferrari. He has brought back some really good wins during his time with Ferrari, and I think that's a huge plaudit to him. Him getting on the podium for his final race in red, it's a really, really good poetic send-off. The one thing that I think I would maybe push back on what Shaz said a little bit was I don't think Charles is much of a fair weather driver. No, the fact specifically referring to how if the car dips, he dips as well. I think in that sense, y'all are going to come at me for this comparison, but I'll take it. So the way I look at it, or at least my observations of it, similar to Lewis, when the car is crap, he will try and push the limit of the car to whatever extent that he can push it to, and try as many different setups as possible to get it working the way he wants it to work. And when that doesn't work out, that's why in the past seasons we've seen Charles spinning it into the walls and just spinning off base every now and then. It's because he's trying to extract the performance out of a car that is not there. And he still somehow or other pulls it off. This season, again, comparing it to the way you were talking about how he is the most consistent driver next to Max, I think that just goes on to show it even more in a sense of, yeah, he has had multiple weekends this season where the car was not doing it, but he still somehow or other drags it where it needs to be to get the points. And his point tallies always reflect that.
AJ, I don't think that's completely true though. Like Charles isn't competing with Carlos Sainz for a world championship, right? He's going to be competing against Max Verstappen, right? And the problem that drivers come up against when they come up against Max is that Max is able to raise the floor and the ceiling at the same time. Like you give him a rubbish car, he'll drag a performance out of it. You give him a great car, he'll elevate that car. And unfortunately, Ferrari might have a great combo of drivers that are able to complement each other and therefore be effective in a constructors fight. But on an individual basis, if you want to go out and beat Max Verstappen, you need to be doing both those things. Do you get what I mean? And there are too many races, such as Spain 2023. Remember that one when they stuck an upgrade on the car, and in fact, even Spain this year, where they changed something on the car goes massively backwards. Charles can't get out of Q1. He can't understand why, and Sainz is on the podium. That's a big problem, man.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree on that front. It makes sense, but look, if if we're looking at this combination of him and Lewis coming into next year, I don't think you could ask for a better partnership, a more complementary partnership between two drivers, in a sense of one is entering his prime and the other is slowly going to be moving out of it. And I think having Lewis around is only going to benefit Charles so much more moving forward, as a driver and as a person. I'm looking forward to it based on Baxty's question of what this means for the team next year, based on just Abu Dhabi alone. Both Charles and Lewis have proved that they can very, very much drag a car from the back of the grid all the way up to the front. And
But-
I think, yeah.
But they can also, when the car is not there, be out in Q1 when their teammate is almost on pole.
Yeah, I guess a cut. That just throw a spanner into the works, man. Damn, you stumped me on that. But I don't want to get too negative on it, man. I'm looking more on the positive side of things. It's if Ferrari can keep the development going the way they have been this year, if they can keep improving the way they've consistently been improving since Fred has come in, strategy wise, I think year round they've done pretty well throughout. There were some calls that we were surprised that they didn't make a mistake on, and they got so many calls spot on for multiple races that gave them really good points and really good finishes, with both cars on the podiums. It's good to see, and I'm just hoping that this positive development, positive sort of changes that we're seeing keeps carrying forward, and they can take the next step that McLaren has done with Zach Brown and Stella next season.
Sorry, was just sort of doing some admin very quickly there. Yeah, no, I think Ferrari on the whole can be very positive about the season they've had. Yeah, okay, they had that slump and they'll be disappointed to have missed out on the championship, but the positives outweigh the negatives, and next year might actually be their year. I mean, we've heard it so many times from Ferrari, but maybe they do have the GOAT coming into their car, so that might just be the point of difference.
Knock on wood.
I see you,
knock on
Max
wood.
Verstappen fans. I see you. Right, we do have a brilliant question.
You mean Zhou Guanyu is going to Ferrari next year?
No, he means Nicholas Latifi's coming back.
Yeah, of
No.
course. Yeah, Latifi. Go Tifi, your favourite driver, Rory. No, but we've got to move on. And we've got a brilliant question in the chat from Stephen Brown. With a record of 5 potential rookies graduating from F2 next season, if Hadjar rumours to be believed, who do you think will perform the best in 2025? Thank you for the question, Stefan, first of all. So the rookies we've got are Antonelli, Behrman. I mean, Lawson kind of is a rookie still. I would say it's a bit. Nah. Then you've got who else have we got? Bortoletto, who just won the F2 Championship. Congratulations to him for that. That was a fantastic achievement. And Doohan, yeah. So there are your 5 rookies. Obviously, Jack made his debut in Abu Dhabi. I thought did a pretty good job. Didn't bin it. Wasn't in trouble.
Considering he was still in the old spec car, which Alpine didn't bother giving any new parts, he was still on Ocon's car, and he finished P14. I think it was pretty decent.
He had a good weekend, and I think definitely saved himself his drive for at least a few races. Obviously, if rumours to be believed. But yeah, so those are the 5. I would, because it's Lawson's full first year next year. We still don't know where he's going to be, but we think he's going to be there. Which of the rookies are you excited to see first? Rory, I'll come to you.
I think I'm excited to see Behrman. We saw what he could do in his brief periods. I do think it won't be that high moments that he's going to have, that he's going to be scoring points every single race, but I think he's going to learn on the job. But I do think I want to see how Gabby Bortoleto does with his Oscar Piastri, George Russell, Peter Series crowned, winning both in consecutive years of each other. He's going to a Sauber. I think it's a good place. It's going to be an Audi Works team in 2 years or so. I think it's if he can use that just to bed in with the team, not really have pressure. Hulkenberg is not a bad driver to learn off. He's a good midfield driver, and he knows he can give great tips to Gabby. I think Bortoleto will just use it as a time just to not iron out your mistakes, but use it as just to bed in, and there won't be much pressure in that Sauber unless Sauber miraculously turning to a race-winning car. But no, I think it's just for him. It should be the perfect opportunity to just lay low, have those moments where he outqualifies Hulkenberg or he gets close to the points. But no, yeah, I think Behrman and Bortoleto, Lawson, like you said, we've seen him in the second half of the season, the last 2 seasons, and we think we know where he's going. But it'd be interesting. Then we have Hajar, who looks like he's going to Minardi. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does. How his F2 title was, he got mecha chromed. F2 drivers love mecha chrome at the moment, and we do too. And then we have Doohan, and I think I'd like to see how Doohan does if he gets a full season next year.
Shez, who have you got out of the rookies?
So this is quite a complex question this year, because genuinely I think this F2 field has been one of the best F2 fields I think I've ever seen. And the fact that somebody like Franco Colapinto, who's barely featuring this season, turned up in a Williams and was able to go toe to toe with a guy that's been in that car for 2 or 3 seasons now, speaks like a huge amount for the depth of talent within that championship. But my worry about this is that the drivers that were built up massively at the beginning of the season, Antonelli and Behrman, haven't really been the ones that have featured so well in that F2 title fight. Antonelli's had his moments, especially in the wet. I'm really excited to see what he does in a Mercedes when the heavens open. That's a very Lewis Hamilton kind of style. And he talks about how his own driving style, late braking, high energy, is a lot like how Lewis drives a car. So I don't know, that might count against him actually in this era of Formula One. Who knows? But the fact that the championship winner, was it by half a point in the end? Like, what did he win it by?
It was comfortable in the end.
It was comfortable because Hajar he was 4 points going into the last race, and then Hajar got a clutch issue, and he's a lap down, so it was about 10 points in the end.
So my issue with Bortoleto, and my usual rule is if you win F2/GP2 as a rookie, in general you're probably going to do pretty well, and I think that as a rule of thumb has borne itself out in the past. You look at Piastri, you look at Leclerc, you look at Hamilton, and you look even at who else is there? Those are the big ones off the top of my head.
George Russell.
Jeez, how did I forget George Russell? We'll come back to him, I'm sure. So when you win F2 GP2 as a rookie, in general, you're going to be quite good. But my worry about Bortoleto, and this is where I think I disagree with you a little bit, Rory, is that Sauber/Audi aren't exactly launching from a position of power, particularly, right, going into next season in 2026. They're going to have a brand new engine, untested, in terms of they have no prior experience of this formula. The chassis team are headed by James Key, who again I have some reservations about as a technical director. For Gabby to then feature, he number one in his rookie season has to outperform Nico Hulkenberg, who himself is a rookie GP2 champion, right? Who is highly rated and has had bad luck when it comes to the teams that he's ended up in and the cars that he's had at his disposal. So to beat him is going to be tricky. So even if he has a good season, objectively, the subjective impression of him is probably not going to be great, and that does limit his options going forwards. Because if he ends up not performing brilliantly, like, and I mean like Fernando Alonso 2001 levels of brilliance in that Sauber Audi, the people are not going to take notice of him. You know, he's not in a driver academy for a team that is higher up the grid. He was at McLaren, but you know, unlike Charles Leclerc, who spent 2018 in that seat, you know, he was already promised pretty much a Ferrari seat at some point, as long as he didn't completely mess up that drive. Whereas Bortoleto doesn't have that security. It worries me a little bit for him.
Do you not think he might have one eye on a McLaren should Oscar Piastri jump ship?
Yeah, but McLaren have cast him aside a little bit, haven't they? They've kind of gone, look, we've got we've got two drivers who we have a lot of faith in. They're a good partnership. Oscar for me it's just a couple of hundredths to maybe a tenth off of Lando's ultimate pace, and that gives them balance. That means that nip and tuck, you're not going to have Oscar every single time outperforming Lando. So that naturally will give them a bit of balance, I think. And even if he does, you know, they've got Ugo in the background as well, who's like, you know,
I was just going to say
they have strength in depth. So
They have
has
an
Bortoleto...
Irishman. They have Alex Stone, an Irishman.
Oh, sorry.
I honestly think McLaren, in terms of depth when it comes to the academy, is probably the strongest right now on the grid.
So then that means that Bortoleto doesn't have the ace in the hole that he may have had he spent a year as reserve driver for McLaren. I know
possibly
it's difficult to say no to a Formula One race drive, nigh on impossible to say no to one.
Yeah.
But could Fernando Alonso, his manager, have just been a little bit smarter about it? More smart than he maybe has been with his own team choices in his career.
Yeah, fair enough. AJ, who's your pick for the rookies? I think I know who you're going to say, but
okay, so I was thinking along the same lines as Shez, because I did have my eye on Bortoleto, and I think the one thing that we're gonna need to make sure we do come the end of next season, and this is in general for everyone, is when assessing rookies, to bear in mind the team that they're driving for and the capabilities of the car. Now, with that being said, who do I think will perform the best? I'm going to use this season as a benchmark in terms of how the cars perform. If the cars perform the same way as they did this year, I think you're going to see a close battle between Doohan and Behrman. But with that being said, I think in terms of the most points, it's going to be between Haja and Antonelli. And my money is probably going to be on Haja if Merc screw things up big time with their car.
Well, Haja score in a Racing Bulls? That's a bold call. That's bold call.
Look at what Yuki's done, and Haja and Bortoleto aren't far off. If people are expecting, again, I'm comparing it based on the team that they're driving on. I think Haja would perform as a whole when you're comparing which team each driver is driving for. I think Haja would be able to extract, the most out of the Racing Bull in comparison to what Antonelli would be able to extract out of a Mercedes, in comparison to what Bortoleto would be able to extract out of a Sauber.
I think, yeah, I mean, look, to me, I think it's fairly clear that Antonelli's probably going to score the most points just simply because he's going to be in the best car.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to surprise people. He's going to be closer to George than, I don't think he's going to beat George, but he's going to be closer to George. I think in terms of who I think is going to perform best, it's hard to judge Lawson and Hajar because we don't know where they're going to be at time of recording. Very important disclaimer. Jack Doohan, I'm not sure is going to get the whole season because Paul Aaron and Mick Schumacher are sniffing around that Alpine seat. And Flavio, I think, is quite keen to shift Jack along, which I think would be harsh. So really, it does come down to Behrman, Hadjar, and Antonelli. And I think, and this is literally because we have data on him, I just think Behrman is probably the best pick at the moment. He goes into a Haas and out qualifies Nico Hülkenberg in Baku, and then jumps into a Ferrari and scores points.
I had to go against the grain on that because you knew I was going to go for Behrman either way, so I had to say something different.
That Ferrari bias coming in strong.
FDA, man, he's a part of the FDA.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said Ferrari bias. There we go. But yeah, no, I think Ollie's the one I'm most. For me, that's British bias, obviously. But I'm excited to see Ollie. And see what he does. I think the pairing with Ocon. Sorry, hang on. Can we get that comment up that's just come in? You are missing an obvious choice for Rookie of the Year. Alonso has world champion potential, might even win 2. How can we forget the eternal rookie? That is Fernando Alonso. 20 years since his first title next year. Can you believe it? 20 years. That is nuts. But yeah, I'm going for Behrman. We'll call it a day there on that discussion because we're going to talk about Red Bull. We're going to talk about Red Bull and their situation. Sergio Perez could not have asked for a worse send-off to his Red Bull career. Got taken out by Valtteri Bottas. Bottas basically decided to have a Hungary 2021 redo into Turn 9. Obviously, Perez's performances this year have been completely unacceptable. If you think that Max has won the championship and he's just been arse, there's no other way to describe it. He's been arse. He's not done. Since he put pen to paper on that new contract, he's been awful. And the performances have just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's made his position completely untenable. So here's where the rumours are at this stage. And we were going to do a video where we were going to predict who was going to get put into various seats, and then the rumors basically came out as we started recording, and it was just like, oh, great, okay, thanks. But the current rumor is that Perez is going to go. He will be replaced by Liam Lawson, and that Isaac Hadjar steps up into the Racing Bulls seat, and we're calling them Racing Bulls because that's apparently what they're being renamed to next season. Which they were apparently supposed to be this year, but they weren't. And Peter Bayer tried to blame everyone apart from them for the mess that was that situation. But there you go. And so that is the current way of things. Obviously, there's been the Yuki to Red Bull hashtag, which I completely agree with. I think Yuki should get the shot at the Red Bull seat, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. And the reason why Perez is still saying I'm going to be there next year is basically he's saying, if you want to get rid of me, you've got to pay me my money because I have a contract. He's well within his rights to say that. He did put pen to paper on a contract. So, yeah, he's going to want to be compensated for that and potentially take a year out and then go to Cadillac in 2026. So,
no, thank you. None of that.
AJ, what do you make of this Red Bull situation? Who do you think is going to be? Do you think that report is correct? It looks pretty accurate, I think, at this stage. I
think, honestly, as much as it pains me to admit it, I think that's what is going to happen. Lawson's going to make that step up to Red Bull. I don't see how Perez sticks around. I just genuinely do not see how he sticks around. Unless there's something that's happening behind the scenes where, he's doing really well in development or some shape or form that we don't know about that keeps him around. But if you're talking about performances on race day, he's out the door. Do I think Lawson should be the one in the Red Bull seat? No. At this point, it feels like Yuki can literally move a brick wall out of its position into the water, and he still would not get a Red Bull seat, no matter how well he performs. and how much work he puts into the car, which is a shame for him. And honestly speaking, if he doesn't get that Red Bull call up next year, given Perez leaving, I hope he leaves the Red Bull family in 2026. He deserves better, and I hope there's a better team to offer him the year after. But yeah, I think that's entire situation of Hadjam moving up and Lawson taking the Red Bull seat. I think that's pretty much what I think most of us expected.
Yeah, Rory is the kind of former Red Bull guy, I think it's fair to say. What are your thoughts on this? And do you agree with the decision to put Liam in? Would you have gone with Yuki, or would you have looked to go outside, maybe pay Carlos Sainz out of his Williams contract, for example?
On Lawson looking like he's going to get C's, I think Lawson hasn't done. He's basically been, I think, the same as Ricardo. I don't think he's done anything major to surprise us or outperform Ricardo. I think he's just been like, yeah, he was close to Yuki. He scored points in a few races against Yuki, but Yuki still had the edge over him in qualifying and so forth. Honestly, we could see a 2019 season Red Bull next year, in a sense that with the drivers, we could see Lawson up to the summer break, and if he doesn't perform, maybe they put Yuki in, or they could put Hadjar in, knowing Red Bull. But I think my thought with Yuki is, if he doesn't, I think if he leaves Formula One and he doesn't have a seat when that, I don't think he comes back. I think he's gone somewhere else. He's gone to IndyCar. He's gone to sports car. I think he's if he doesn't have a seat in F1, he's not going to be around. I think, unless Honda have a customer engine somewhere in another team alongside Aston Martin, he gets a seat. But with Yuki, I think Yuki deserves a seat. Deserves it. My two reasons that Red Bull either think that Yuki's the same driver from 2021, which he's not, or he is too of a Honda driver, and when Honda leave, he's going to leave. But I do think Red Bull have screwed themselves over in a sense with their driver program. They haven't had, since Max Verstappen and the abrupt of Red Bull leaving, Daniel Ricciardo leaving Red Bull, they haven't had a driver to put in. And I think how Red Bull run that team, they expect the second driver to be as close to Max or beating him. And I think Red Bull need to take a step back and realize you need a driver that can score being the top 6 regularly and be maybe half a second off Max. I think that would be perfect for Red Bull. The other thing with Red Bull is, you saw a Perez that they went out and got Perez out of their driver program because they didn't have it. And going to Perez, I think I actually feel bad for Sergio in the sense that it's either Red Bull. We have to remember at the end of 2020, Perez was one of the best drivers on the grid, midfield drivers on the grid, and he was looking for that top seat. He went to Red Bull, got 4 wins, multiple podiums, became one of the most successful Mexican driver in F1. I think it's kind of like, yes, it hasn't worked out. He probably Red Bull should have stepped in and said, we're not going to sign that contract at the start of the year. Maybe just said, we'll leave it at that and not have this controversy at the end of it. But I don't think Perez will take up that ambassador role. Why be an ambassador when you could be in F1 and driving? And that's probably his point why like that. But yeah, I think Red Bull have made it known and probably would admit it that if they could, they would just enter one car, because that second Red Bull seat is a poison chalice. Anyone, the drivers I think that you could put in that seat and maybe that would challenge Max regularly is Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc on the prime, I think, but I wouldn't. But I think it's no. I think Red Bull are not. Red Bull are just focused on Max Verstappen at the moment, and that's it.
Shez, there's a question there, which I'm going to leave to you to answer, which came up from Last Resort. Is Yuki a Red Bull driver or a Honda driver?
That's a good question, isn't it? I mean, he was picked up by Horner and Marco during his F3 and F2 seasons, wasn't he? But he has always had an element of Honda backing. But unfortunately, that's just par for the course for drivers from Japan. They just don't seem to get the recognition on their own merits that they should do in Europe. And I wonder if Yuki is now falling victim to that again when it comes to promotion up to the main Red Bull seat. And I don't know if the Honda thing is actually more of a hindrance to him than anything else. Like them pushing in the background, does it put everyone's ear out a little bit? I don't know. I think the solution to Red Bull's driver problem requires a bit more work than just trying to put your hand in the candy dish and pull out another driver and hope that they're going to do better than the last one. That hasn't worked since 2019. And actually, the reasons for that, I think, are not down to just Sergio Perez. There's been a shift in the way that Formula One cars need to be driven to get the best out of them. And unfortunately, Perez is of a generation before that really takes geometric lines, needs a really planted rear end with less reliance on the front end being hyper alert. But that's not the quickest way to get the best out of the Red Bull. And that's what Max is able to do with that hyper alert front end. He's able to get rotation early and is able to then just float the car into the corner and get it straightened up really early. That's what gives him massive pace. Alex Albon, by the end of 2020, had realized that and was starting to put the work in the simulator that then paid dividends, that allowed Sergio Perez to have the 2021 season that he had. When Rory, you say that it hasn't worked out, I would argue it has worked out, that Perez did exactly what he was supposed to do in 2021. And actually in 22 and 23, he did about as good a job as he could reasonably have been expected to do in that Red Bull. But we already knew at the end of last season that if he didn't up his game, if anybody else, any other team got into the mix, his driving style just doesn't work for that car. So I would argue that what Red Bull need to do is look at the way that drivers that they are evaluating for that seat drive. How do they get their pace? If it's someone that doesn't like a strong front end, they're not going to work in that car. They are going to leave. They're going to be behind by a lot. And 5/10 on this grid is like 7 or 8 spots on the grid, man. That's huge amount. You can't be that far behind your other driver. And when Red Bull are sort of their lead driver is getting 5th or 6th on the grid, you being 5/10 off that puts you out in Q2 or Q1. That's going to be the same for any driver at the moment, not just Perez. So I think they have a fundamental issue with the way that they go about finding their drivers. If it was me and I was in charge of driver hiring for the main Red Bull team, I would say someone like Alex Albon or Carlos Sainz right now would be my top picks, because they both, Carlos, because he can adapt well to anything, right? He won't be there straight away, but he will ultimately get the best from a car eventually. He can improve. And Alex, because he even says that when he was in F2 up against Russell, Leclerc, Norris, he wanted a stronger front end than any of them did. So if anyone's going to be able to deal with what that car can do right now, Alex is probably not a bad shout, but they won't look at him. Or he's too expensive to get out of his Williams contract. Maybe both of them are. But that, for me, is what Red Bull need to be doing.
I honestly just hope that I see what you mean by Alex being the perfect solution, because I fully agree with that. I think there was talks about before Lewis signed with Ferrari, is Alex going in to partner Charles, because they all like that strong front end on their cars. And that's the direction in which you need to go when it comes for teams. But given how Alex was treated with Red Bull, even though that's the type of driver they need right now, just because of that relationship strain, I hope that Alex would never return to a Red Bull team. Because
like it wouldn't be good for him. I don't disagree with that. But in terms of what Red Bull need out of their second driver,
Yes.
That's the kind of direction that they need to be looking in, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's my take on it, and my fear for this is that I just don't think Red Bull have learnt their lessons from the past. I mean, they chucked Gasly in relatively untested in 2019. He'd had a whole season in 2018, but he was still pretty fresh and didn't quite know how to handle top team pressure. And obviously it blew up in half a season. And then they chucked in Albon with half a season experience. Now, Alex did pretty well when he first jumped in, but over time it ate away at him. And 2020 was a complete disaster for Alex. I mean, I'm seeing so many parallels this season with Checo to Alex, the way that we spoke about him, the way that we wanted him to do well, but he just, every time you thought this might be the weekend they get a result, they would then find a way to not get the result. The difference being on this occasion is that Checo has ended up costing Red Bull a Constructors Championship, whereas they were never competing for the Constructors Championship in 2020 because Merck were just so far ahead of everybody else. And I feel like chucking in Liam now suggests to me that they haven't learnt the mistakes of potentially throwing in somebody a bit too early. Yeah, there's talk of that they think he's got the right mentality for it, which he may do, but there's only so much mentality you can have, and then before you start looking at Max Verstappen's data a bit more regularly and seeing what he can do, and then you're like, well, I can't do that. So I think I'm concerned by this, and I think Yuki would be a better option purely because of his experience in Formula One. He's been there for 4 years now, and okay, he's not going to win you a championship, I don't think, but I do feel that he is somebody that could be a very reliable number two should Red Bull need to call upon him. I think he'd be more reliable than Lawson, certainly.
I think that's part of the problem, though. I don't know if any of our comments are going up, but the last person, last resort, I think has just put up a really good comment. In that Red Bull's issue is that they look at every other driver as if they should be Max. Why can't you get the same out of the car or close to what Max can get out of the car? Red Bull themselves have admitted that Max's ability to deal with the rear instability that results from that strong front end has led them down a development black hole that they have not been able to get out. They did it with Alex, right? In 2019 to 2020, Alex was saying, look, I can't deal with this front end. And it was at that point that Pierre Vacher turned around and said, oh, actually, we have to listen to him because we are going down a development path, because Max can just drive around a problem so well that he masks the problems with the car. So Max is not a reliable narrator when it comes to to how good that car is. He will maximize what the car can do because that's what Max does, but it doesn't mean that the car is actually any good, right? And the fact that they have lost Adrian Newey to Aston Martin, I think causes a major problem for them because they don't have the know-how, that the joined up thinking for mechanical aero driver that they have had in the past that will allow somebody like Alex or Yuki or Liam or whoever to give their feedback and be listened to. And until Red Bull sort those two issues out, that they find a driver, number one, that can deal with a strong front end and a degree of rear instability, and second, start listening to their second driver in the way that they didn't to Checo. Checo, like Horner has admitted that the point at which Red Bull started to drop off was Spain 2023. That's when they had a development fork that they went down that was poor, and Checo's performance went off from then. Max just kept getting the results, and it just kept going down that development path, and that's what's led them to the latter half of this season. And until they understand that and stop getting waylaid or given false optimism by the performances that Max is getting out of that car, they're always going to have this problem with the second driver, I think.
Yeah, no, it's we could talk about this for hours, I think, but we do need to move on to one last topic, and slightly happier climbs, I think it's fair to say. And it is, of course, celebrating Sir Lewis Hamilton, his final race for Mercedes, and he went out in style, I think it's fair to say. Obviously, qualifying was an unmitigated disaster, as it has been for quite a lot of this season. No, not his fault. Not his fault this time. Kevin Magnussen sabotaged him, that evil driver, by knocking that bollard deliberately into his way. I can't even finish that point, seriously. No, it was just an unfortunate thing. He was up on the Delta right up until that moment. He was probably about 2 tenths quicker than George Russell on that lap, and then obviously went horribly wrong for him. But without that, I think he probably ends up on the podium. But he still finished in style, made up 14 seconds on the last stint. We got one last hammer time from Bono, which was beautiful to see and hear. Shez, you and I are probably the biggest Lewis Hamilton guys here. What a way to end the greatest partnership the sport's ever seen.
I mean, it's been a bittersweet season, hasn't it? Like, there's it's been a season of massive contrast in that there's so much to celebrate for the last sort of 12 seasons, but the fact that it's it's true, but the fact that it's ended on this season as a whole is a little bit disappointing, but it's had its moments, hasn't it? So Silverstone for me, I mean, I still can't even really think about Bono's last lap radio to him without tearing up a little bit. It's just it was just such, like anybody that says that Mercedes don't love Lewis Hamilton just need to listen to that radio again. The joy in that radio message, like the sheer unadulterated euphoria that came from Lewis winning at his home race, that in the way that he did, like I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, and the way that Lewis, you know, did all the classic Lewis things, came from the back, made up a massive time deficit, put in a really good stint on the hard tires to go deep into the race, and complained about his tires, complained over the radio, made a little joke about a cunning plan, and then you know, pulled off a pass for the position at the end of the race. And I agree with you. If it hadn't been for that bollard, he would have been higher up the grid. But then I think we would have been robbed of what is a quintessential Lewis Hamilton drive. And I don't think it could have ended in a better way, given that the way this season has gone. I think that was an absolute movie fairy tale kind of drive. And I'm going to find it really weird not seeing in a Mercedes next season. I think that the way he sat in the car at the end, you know, took his time to remove the steering wheel, knelt down by his car after, as I've said to you, actually messing up his donuts. I think yes, he's not retiring, but it does feel like it's the end of something special. And I'm sad to see it finish, but excited to see what Lewis has to do next. Because for me, any time that Lewis has a car with which he can compete and is motivated to do so, he's still, for me, box office. He's absolutely brilliant to watch.
Yeah, Rory, how did you take Lewis's last drive in a Mercedes? I mean, it was the end of an iconic partnership.
Yeah, I think leading up to this, we all knew it was going to be like an emotional weekend, even if you weren't a Lewis or Mercedes fan. It is like Shez says, it's going to be weird not seeing him in Mercedes tops, and on the grid. But he's going to red, and like he said, he looks good in red. So we're all going to admire him in his new red colors. But no, I think like Shez and you actually lose it. It was a quintessential Lewis Hamilton drive in the sense that he started from the back. Yes, his qualifying has to be the greatest this year, but he's still amazing on electric on a Sunday, and he's able to make up those positions. And when Mercedes keeps saying we're going to, like they said, we forecast a P6 for Lewis on Sunday, and he gets a P4. He's able to outmatch Mercedes simulations. But yeah, I do think, it was one of his. It was a great send off for him. The send off for me, the send off felt like he was retiring for some reason because of how much it was like he was switching team. He's only switching teams, but no, just think about when he actually retires. It's going to be a huge moment in the sport when that happens. But at this moment present, he's going to a new journey in Ferrari, and hopefully he can have similar success.
What, another 6 championships? Yeah, I'll take that. In his 40s, that'd be incredible. AJ, how did you enjoy Lewis's last race? How good was that overtake at the end? Turn 9, incredible.
I think it was amazing. And I'm glad you brought up the overtake. If we could have last comment come up, because that was beautiful. The fact that he started his Mercedes career and ended it with a very similar move. I think it's also, there were a couple of things that we saw online. I don't know if you guys, I'm pretty sure you guys have seen it, but the comparisons to his last race and the events that happened in his last race for McLaren and how similar they are to his last race with Mercedes. It's just like everything was aligned, and it was sort of a fairy tale final race for him. And even though, like you guys said, it felt like something special, even though he's not retiring, look, it is something special. It's not, it was something special, nor was it, it felt like something special. What him and Mercedes have done together is a historic part of the sport. It is absolutely sensational. And as much as I hated that era of dominance, it is always going to be a part of the history of the sport where I don't think can be replicated anytime soon, or if it would ever even be replicated. It's one of those things. And to all those who kept saying that, Mercedes don't like Lewis and Toto is, trying to get rid of Lewis and the relationship is broken and whatever not, please watch that video of him and Lewis sharing a hug in the paddock, in the garage, sorry, at the end of the race, where both of them are just holding each other's shoulders, shaking one another, and like you can see how much it means to both of them that this is the end of it. And Bono wearing the trademark Lewis attire in his Tommy, like it just
hilarious.
it doesn't make sense. Like with everything that they've done together as a team, there's no way they would disrespect Lewis to such an extent. It's so embedded into the team, into Lewis's career, into the journey. Their stories are so intertwined because as much as Lewis was given the car by Mercedes were fortunate to have Lewis to be the one to drive it, to be able to sort of extract those performances out of the car. And I don't think, thanks for bringing that up, Manny. That's the video I was talking about. But if anyone thinks that Lewis is losing it, look, time and time again this season, as you guys have said before, on race day, he has shown us he still has it. It's not just Abu Dhabi, but it's multiple points throughout this season. He has always shown us that he still has it on race day. Yes, maybe qualifying leaves something to desire, but if you're talking about the race day in itself, I am genuinely looking forward to see what him and Charles do in the Ferrari. And at the end of the day, everyone's a Ferrari fan.
Yeah, I'm splitting my time next year.
Negative.
Yeah, I'm splitting my time next year between Maranello and Brackley, I'll be honest. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point you said about, Toto and Lewis clearly hate each other. It's just emerged in the last few hours that Lewis gave Toto his tribute helmet to Nicky from Monaco 2019 as a gift. And I think that, that's not you don't do that to somebody you hate. That is a genuine token of love and affection and respect. And I'll kind of give my thoughts on this, and we'll close out after this. But when Lewis moved to Mercedes in 2013, it was very much boy becoming man. And during that time, yeah, he did become the man that we know him to be today. But he also became an icon. He became a social activist. He became a fashion icon. He became bigger than the sport. And it is a period of time that is very special to me as a Formula One fan, because I was always with Lewis when I started watching Formula One, but he also cemented my love for Mercedes as well. And that is unbroken, despite everything that's happened this year. It is a partnership that will never be seen again, certainly in Brackley. As good as Kimi could be, I just don't see it being anywhere close to what. I'm not having that chat with you now. This is a partnership that has transcended the sport. But not only that, this is a driver that has transcended the sport. He is the needle mover. He is the icon. He is the one that we think about when you think about Formula One, and you have done for nearly 20 years. And I will miss him. If I put my Mercedes hat on, I'm going to miss him terribly. They called him Mr. Mercedes. He is Mr. Mercedes, and he always will be. And then if I put my Ferrari hat on, which I have one now, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. I have more to say on that, but I'll keep my powder dry for next year. But what an incredible 12 seasons it's been. And I just thought his radio message at the end was beautiful. I didn't hate that every dream needs a team. I know a lot of people criticized it. I thought it was perfect representation of who Lewis is and his time with the team. Lewis is all about the team. He's all about empowering the team, and I feel like he would have wanted that to be a celebration of the team as well. But I'm still gutted it's over. I never thought I'd see Lewis go to another team, much in the same way that I think a lot of people thought Schumacher would never race for anyone other than Ferrari. And when he came back in a Mercedes, it was a shock. But yeah, I can't thank Lewis enough for the memories he's given me. And I hope he continues to give me more memories in the future. And not just me, but everyone here. And if you want to see a cool edit, go and look at Rory's edit as well, where he's put the Linkin Park edit in. Rory, the king of the memes. And that was beautifully done, sir. Beautifully done. And Rory Talks Motorsport on Instagram for that. Absolutely amazing edit. And on that note, we are going to end. Thank you to Shez, to AJ, and to Rory, and to Fly. Shez, we can find Shez at TireGP and ShezMed on both Twitter and Threads. AJ, you can find him at Shiver Me Eaters on Twitter. What's your Threads handle again, pal?
Ajitpaul96. I'm gonna change that soon. So
okay, yeah. And also you can find AJ on Forecast F1 as well. Rory Talks Motorsport on Instagram. Rory Talks F1 on Twitter. You can find Rory there. You can find me, BaxTB F1 on YouTube, BaxTB on Twitter, BaxTB F1 on Threads. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, please do like, comment, and subscribe. We had a great response to the last podcast. We've just hit 50 subs, which may not seem like a lot, but we're very proud of that. We're very happy with that, and we want to continue to grow that. Obviously, thank you to everyone that's tuned in live and left your comments and your questions. This has been your Abu Dhabi Grand Prix review. We will do a season review at some point in the next week, but keep an eye out for that. And if you don't want to miss it, subscribe. That's simple, really. And we are also on Spotify and iTunes. I think we're on iTunes. We're definitely on Spotify. I think we're also on iTunes. Links to that will be in the description below. But until next time, guys, stay safe and speak to you all very, very soon.